Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, Florida, officially a basketball school. We could say it.
I think they're getting into the territory of an everything school now that we've seen kind of the drought of titles. And I mean, every SEC school almost is at the drought of titles for basketball, right? But it's one thing to win with those great players they had back in the day, but then to bring it around to make it past Billy Donovan, pretty impressive.
It's unbelievable, man. And for a school that I had admittedly had on the back burner with basketball throughout the 2020s for a while. And Adam, I remember when they hired Todd Golden, was very much on board with, this is going to work. This is going to be so much better than the Mike White experience. And for it to culminate with a national championship in year 3 is something that, look, I didn't see coming as someone who absolutely loved those Florida teams that repeated, of course. And I mean, I love really Billy's last great Florida team, Billy Donovan, I should say. We should get mixed up Billy's when we're talking about Florida in 2014. But man, what a fun team to watch. Can't believe they won that game. Just truly can't. A game that they led for a minute 3. And talking with my Florida people that were at that game, that got to experience it, just unbelievable euphoria. One of the most bizarre endings of a championship game I have ever seen. Like, bizarre to the point where my mom called me afterwards and had to have a 10-minute conversation about what happened because she didn't understand why he couldn't touch the ball. Was it the shot clock that was going off? What was going on with what Emmanuel Sharp did? And it was just a weird ending. You're like, oh my God, Florida just won a title. And I thought Walter Clayton Jr. had the look all over his face right after of like, wait a minute, that means we won. That's how that works. Just a wild game, and very, very happy for Florida fans that they got to experience that.
Yeah, and I'll say too, I mean, hats off to Auburn. They played a great game too. I think those were obviously 2 of the best teams in America. I'll give congratulations to Florida, Houston, Auburn. There was another team in the top 4, I believe.
Exactly. 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four would have won a national championship and a lot of other years. Duke, I don't know. I'm just kidding. Duke,
no, but like, point being, like, I think they played a great game I think Auburn played a great game against Florida. And I think in both of those games, it became apparent that Florida just had that dog in them, right? Like, it felt like Auburn was starting to put them away. It felt like Houston was starting to put them away. And then when it became winning time, Florida became the best version of themselves. And that's what, great teams do. And I think exactly to your point, I mean, Les Miles was somewhere taking notes on the ending of that one for Houston, because good Lord, man, like the way we watched a lot of basketball. We've watched a lot of bad basketball too. I've never seen a game in like that. And that's like the stuff that you wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats thinking you did that. We're like, oh no, I can't touch the ball. What's going to happen? Like, I feel so bad for that kid, man.
I hope Emmanuel Sharp comes back and hits the game-winning shot to win a national championship next year. Would be a great arc for him. A guy who still has eligibility, even though he feels like he's been at Houston forever. I have picked Houston to go to the Final Four, I think, each of the last 5 years, or maybe 4 of the last 5 years, because I've told myself at some point Kelvin Sampson's going to win a national title in my face, and I'm just going to have to deal with it as an Indiana grad. And there have been so many moments watching Houston late in a game in which I've thought to myself, this team is a mess. For how tough they are, they're kind of a mess. Now, they do things well in given moments, like the blob to beat Purdue was an unbelievable sequence at the end of that game. And there have been, obviously, the Duke comeback was the stuff of legend, but they've had a lot of moments during these wins in the 2020s wherein you thought, Houston, they do not look poised. They do not look together. It's almost like you need to kind of count them out of a game for them to be at their best. And yeah, 3 turnovers in the last 3 possessions, not getting a shot off in that spot. And those last 3 possessions, absolutely brutal.
And Florida looked massive too. Also, I will say, as random as college basketball is, as much as we're telling ourselves March Madness, those last possessions coming down, and specifically that last one, it was like everywhere they tried to go with the ball, they hit a wall, and Florida looked so just imposing. And it was like, yeah, you can always think, oh, the ball would bounce in a weird way and somebody would just be standing there, but it felt like there was just nowhere to go with the ball, even if that decision hadn't been made. So yeah, great title run overall for Florida.
SEC drought is over. First national championship victory for the SEC since 2012 Kentucky, when I was in college. That's just a crazy thought. And yeah, the SEC basketball golden age perhaps upon us after having the greatest season ever by a conference. You can definitely say that now. 1985 Big East is really the only other competition, in my opinion, just because 3 or 4 Final Four, all Big East national championship game. But you break down some of the other things, the Sweet 16 participation, half of the Elite Eight, the 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. It's just absurd to think about the year that SEC basketball had and to have it culminate with a national championship. To me, it just kind of ends the argument. So, yes, we will probably, if I'm guessing, well, actually, I know this for a fact because my lad of the week is Florida based. We'll have more Florida talk with lad of the week. We'll get to later.
You're not going to believe mine. Yeah.
Oh, yours is not Florida?
It is Florida based, but you're not going to believe it. Continue.
Okay. We have a great pod coming up. In case you didn't read the title, we have a certain Sam Pittman.
Yes, sir.
Up. Yeah. Yes, sir. I almost asked him to do a yes, sir at the end of it. And then I said, you know what? That's like kind of year 1, year 2 stuff. We'll move past that. So we did not get a yes, sir from Sam Pittman.
We talked hog maintenance. We talked embracing the hog. So we're really getting into the deeper cuts now with Sam. You're only going to find that here.
Drink a Miller Lite every time you hear me say the word hog in that interview, just a couple of times. So we have that coming up in a bit. And then we're going to get into, with the open here, the death of spring games, or the death of televised spring games. It's some sort of death of spring games. But before we do that, a quick word from our friends at Dabble, who, look, if you are one of those people that you lived and died by your bracket, the NCAA tournament was your entire interest as a sports fan, Dabble has you covered. They absolutely do. There is right now MLB. I mean, you could turn on your TV probably right now at this very moment and watch Major League Baseball, because there is probably more Major League Baseball on than anything else. We're going to have NBA playoffs coming up really, really soon. And if you're looking to get into the DFS space, Dabble absolutely has you covered. It is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space, and they wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none, and they offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including, like I said, NBA playoffs, MLB. That is in full swing right now. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that's promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Will, have you ever written a eulogy before?
Not a eulogy. I've spoke at funerals, but I think it's a little different.
Little different. Similar vibe. I've written one and a half. I'll call it 1.5. I think and I hope that I will write many eulogies in my life, because it's a sign that you loved people, and it's a sign that you had a lot of thoughts on people that were very close to you in your life, and it means you're probably living a long time if you get to do something like that, as brutal as that process can be. But thought about writing one for spring games. Feel like they deserve a little bit of a eulogy here, because I initially thought that when Matt Rule spoke out about how much spring games can showcase a player who then just goes on to enter the portal, I think everyone and their mother has sort of agreed with him and decided that a televised spring game really isn't for them. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you can follow along here with some of these numbers that I'm going to throw out. FBSschedules.com, which is my go-to for all things future scheduling. I love looking up future non-conference schedules, getting into the 2030s and breaking down whether or not Georgia is playing 2 or 3 power conference opponents in non-conference play. That's what I'm all about, really. But
this is one of my favorite things, by the way, remnants of old internet, where there's just probably some dude or like 3 dudes that are just like feverishly inputting that stuff into footballschedules.com. I don't believe they're owned by any big network or anything. They're just some sickos like us who are like, we see the Citadel in 28. All right, put that in there.
FBSschedules.com. And it has up to the hour scheduling.
Yep.
Indiana just scheduled Delaware for 2030. Will, can you look this up right now? This is a side tangent that's got nothing related to what we're talking about, but this is going to show you how good my people are at FBSschedules.com. I swear this is not an ad. This is just a personal endorsement as a loser who looks.
Delaware adds Indiana to 2030 football schedule, front line.
Bang.
Front page.
That's what I'm talking about. They are that on top of it. So I am assuming that their TV schedule for these spring games is very much accurate, because, buddy, it is sparse. Here is the list, Will, of SEC spring games that will be on TV this April. This Saturday, Oklahoma, going to be on SEC Network Plus. That's right. Next Saturday, April 19th, Texas A&M will be on SEC Network Plus. That's it. Those are the only SEC spring games that will be available on television in some form, some sort of streaming program to the masses. Maybe there's some deal worked out there where like, some of these universities have premium subscription services that I'm sure there's something available to that regard, maybe, but not even that. That is wild to think about. And it's not to say that spring games aren't happening, because there are still spring games in the SEC that you can attend in person. Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, who's playing at 9:30 local time this Saturday. Do they want?
Well, that way, if the offense is sluggish, they can blame the time. So huge brain move there.
Yeah, look, how much can you drink before 9:30 a.m. local game in Baton Rouge? I don't know. Tennessee also having one, Vandy having one as well. So it's not that spring games are dead for the in-person fan. They still technically exist. That's great. I'm happy for people that can make that trip. Once upon a time, sports weren't on TV, and it made it that much more special to be able to get there and experience it in person. And maybe there's a little bit of a throwback feel in that regard. But now, because of the spring portal opening on April 16th, there has been a clear move by teams, not just in the SEC, but really across college football, to make sure that you're not seeing these guys unless you've got a Connor Stallions on your staff. That's it.
Honestly, I get it. I really do. You're going to hate me here for this one, Connor, but this might be the old TV guy in the back of my brain. But I'm like, who does it really benefit to put these games on television if you're a university? All you're going to do is build up expectations for your players, put them on TV basically for free. Whereas in this model, okay, you could sell premium stuff. You could sell SEC Plus. You could get people to come to the games, like a blackout. Your biggest donors and stuff are going to be in town anyway. So I actually kind of like that they're doing this, as unfortunate as it is as a viewer, because everybody's cheating, Paul. I mean, if you could get tape, like to the point about Connor Stallions, and the other alternative would be to do some weird little Mario Party game like we've done in years previous, where guys are like dunking basketballs or running like, triangle offenses and stuff. So I would rather have a good, meaningful spring game that I don't see than have a joke one that everybody sees, I guess.
If you have a Gen Xer holding up an iPad, just glazing into the sun, you might have a Connor Stallions in your stadium. You might. Probably do. I would say.
And Kirby's on that. I remember going to a Georgia game where Kirby had like this giant, ancient Egyptian style scroll that he was holding up for his play calls because he knew about Stallions before the allegations came out. So they know what's going on out there.
Yes, they do. Now, we're still going to have beat reporters are going to be on site, and that's great. And I salute the beat reporters who are there, who are, in the trenches covering this stuff, because there is useful information that comes out, and there's no doubt about it. Like, we really rely on them more than we care to admit, and I'm including myself in that. Things are going to trickle out, just like when we get a media availability portion of a practice. You can say, oh my gosh, this guy made an unbelievable catch. Oh, this is the guy that coaches are really high on. We're still going to get some of that. We'll also have creative teams in-house that'll be putting highlights on social media, which will get plenty of overreactions. Now, that's not the way that I like to consume these things, and I know some people do. If I'm a fan, though, I am not relying on those to shape my perception about how I feel about a specific player. I'm just not. I would much rather see it with my own eyes and go, oh, Will Anderson is so dominant that Alabama literally can't run an offensive rep until they kick him out of the spring game and say, go over there on the sideline. You're ruining this for everyone.
They're just tying different parts of his body behind his back. Like one hand, one leg. Yeah.
All right, now skip to the quarterback. See if you can do that.
3 Mississippi run.
Buddy, he's going to need 7 Mississippi. It was, that was a beatdown. That's not the way this is going to work anymore. It's just not. No longer am I personally going to be building my weekends around spring games. I'll see the takeaways from each. I'll watch what I can, but gone are the days in which we can assume that a Saturday in April is going to be wall-to-wall spring game coverage. I remember 4 years ago, Will, and you might remember this too, because we were really just ramping things up with this iteration of the pod. My brother had his bachelor party, and it was, like with all bachelor parties, you kind of run through the available weekends. Hey, what works here? This guy can't do this. We'd really like for him to be able to be there. And I had a moment where I was seriously debating excluding the weekend that we ended up picking, because it was a huge Saturday of SEC spring games. It was like mid-April. And I was like, I don't know if I can make this work. There's going to be so much going on. Georgia's got this interesting thing with JT Daniels that I'd like to be able to watch in real time. And Texas A&M is going to be in it. Then I ended up just watching all these spring games late Sunday night and Monday when I got back home, made it work. Shout out Matthew Loves Ball, who used to put up all these on YouTube. Don't know if that's still going to be the case this year, but we made it work, and we recorded a pod, and we had all these observations, and it was good stuff. Different times now. Different times. And it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, this might come off as a bit of a complaint because I'd like to have more access to this stuff. I'd like to have more content to be able to give you, the people who are just craving content now that college basketball is over. So I feel for you. I don't want to be at a place where I spend 20 minutes talking about this one ridiculous toe tapping grab that a guy made in slow-mo video in the middle of an April practice. I don't. Like, I'm sorry. That's not my type of content. And I would rather have more context that goes into this stuff. But look, I try and keep this in perspective because it wasn't that long ago. Spring football was nothing. Really nothing. Then we got these TV deals going, and really that happened around the start of the playoff era in the SEC. It was an opportunity for conference networks to be able to have some live programming when we knew that basketball was long gone, especially in the SEC. Let's call it like it is. So, yeah, at the time, it makes sense. Why not have some fun with it, come up with some wacky scoring system, pray for good weather, make the loser eat hot dogs. Let's enjoy a nice spring Saturday. Let's make it feel like it's fall, even though it's definitely not. And let's, have some overreactions, and let's just, let's make a day of it. Let's make a day of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. In hindsight, it might be somewhat of a miracle that coaches signed on for it. As we know, coaches are such big control freaks with all this, especially with access. Like that Netflix doc that a lot of people are really excited about, which I am too, because the Netflix, how could I put this delicately, Will? The Netflix Untold series is not my favorite of sports documentaries, but the real true to life, like full swing, like the F1 stuff is widely regarded, right? This SEC show that's going to be coming out this summer is meant to be in that style, right? We also know Alabama's not going to be there. Georgia, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Texas, they all turned it down. Like, we'd rather not. We'd rather just not allow this type of access. Clearly, those programs aren't worried about the potential gains of something like this, and they're more worried about the potential downside of exposure. Let's be clear, though. In the NIL era, I think guys are more exposed than ever for the simple fact that unless you want to shun those opportunities, you have to be more exposed. Arch Manning is out here getting Viore deals that I'm totally not jealous of at all, and it's not the only pair of shorts I wear. Credit to Arch for being able to get those opportunities, putting himself out there in ways that if this were not the NIL era, he would not be doing. I guarantee you, if NIL weren't a part of it, he wouldn't be doing a half-hour sit-down with our good friend Marty Smith for Red Bull. Like this type of exposure.
Then he'd be eating ramen noodles. He'd be starving if there was no NIL.
Ramen's kind of having a moment. As we know, place in Orlando, Domu. Best ramen your boy's ever going to have. I'm just saying.
Facts.
There are, I think, a lot of benefits of that exposure. But we also get to see these guys on TV every week in the fall, which we weren't able to do at the start of the 21st century. And so I don't want to sound too petty about not being able to see these guys in the spring game, unless you're in person. Again, it's not that big of a deal. It's really not. Coaches are all about avoiding headaches. They could tell you better than I could how many times a guy has just balled out in the spring game and then gone back to the negotiating table because he had people in his DM saying that he could get X from another school. I am not privy to all those conversations, but I know it's happening. It has to be. And while I still believe there's true value in having spring games on TV, I'm not the one who has to sit in his office and figure out if that second string receiver who made 2 nice plays in a spring game is worth what he says he can get in the open market. Okay? So I acknowledge that. Now, as Sam Pittman is going to tell you later on, the inability to have that interconference transferring protects SEC coaches to a certain extent. I am not a fan of that rule as a fan who would like to see guys just be able to go to the best situation and not necessarily have to work around that. The Bear Alexander thing from a couple of years ago, we can say what we want about Bear Alexander, but it was weird that it was very much a foregone conclusion. Nobody in the SEC can touch this guy, even though probably 9 teams in the SEC would have been lining up for his service and probably disappointed with.
That's what stopped Bear Alexander from finding his forever home, man. If he had just been able to transfer to Tennessee or something, he would have been a straight A student.
Hope it works out for Bear Alexander. A lot of movement there.
Yeah.
A lot of movement. I bet coaches before these untelevised spring games will even have to get on the same page with their creative team, right? You work in this side, Will. You get this.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there are discussions being had with teams saying, hey, if this guy makes a big-time play, don't put that video out on social media. Just don't. People can talk about it. Is a guy getting a big-time offer from a Justin Hokanson tweet? Shout out Justin. Justin does great work covering Auburn. Love Justin. I don't know. Maybe. But when that dude is all of a sudden making plays that look like he's better than Cam Coleman, that might raise some eyebrows. And if that's getting put out there, you have to worry about what you're putting out there. And there could be a do not show list for guys in untelevised spring games. I think that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Will, as a fan of LSU that also understands the creative side, what would be your thoughts on that? About LSU, who is not televising its spring game, about having maybe a guy that's going to be entering year 2 or something like that, playing at any position whatsoever. What are your thoughts as a fan? Would you want to see that content, or is the risk too great knowing that a team, with the portal window opening up in a week here, could look at that and go, sign me up. We need some of that on our roster.
So I do think that's two different answers. I think as a creative professional, I think it all scrolls down from the administration, right? i.e., in this situation, the head coach. So I would never do something that would upset like a Brian Kelly in that situation because it's just not worth it. Now, that being said, from a content standpoint, I think you're hitting on something important, which is that if I were to do a video for, LSU, let's say one of these new transfer, because LSU has a ton of transfer guys coming in too that we haven't seen in purple and gold yet. So that's actually a really good example. So let's say that, one of these guys makes a sick catch. I think we could do a compilation video, put some kind of effects on it to where everything looks cool, kind of make it like a Zapruder film eyes where you zoom in on it. You can't see like the broadcast angle, you make it look cool. I mean, I could take a tape of Christian Hackenberg and make him look Tom Brady,
Easy, friend of the program.
I know, but you know what I'm saying? Like I could, and we love him. That's why I'm making that point. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the point is that he had some great throws or Kurt, Drew Aller, same deal. Right. And so I think that's what I would do is make everyone look awesome. And then that way you can't really tell who's awesome, if that makes sense. I think on the other end of it as a fan, I'm very, this is going to be a quick side tangent. Do you know who a gentleman named Vander Blue is? He's a basketball player.
Vander Blue. I know Jaden Blue. I know Alfred Blue. I just know running backs with the last name Blue.
Throwback, Albert Blue, yeah. So Vander Blue is this dude. I say this because there's a non-zero chance you might have covered this guy. He was at Marquette from 2010 to 2013, around that same time we were in Indiana, and he was a summer league staple, right? This dude would show up in the NBA summer league and average 30 points in the summer league every year I was there. I'm talking about this dude would get buckets on everybody, and I would be sitting there. I was 21 years old or whatever. I was young. I was dumb. I was like, this guy needs to be on a roster. And quickly, every professional and coach would tell me, it's just summer league, dude. And so the other side of that is, I have one of my friends sent me an LSU account, one of those like fan journalist thing that's in there charting all the red zone attempts from LSU's practice and going, well, the red zone numbers are horrible in practice. Da-da-da. I don't want to see that. This season's 9 months away. I don't want to sit here worried about LSU's offense when there's nothing I can do about it. And very, very likely when the offense comes out and it is real next year, it's going to be good. And on the other side of it, I was very excited about some parts of LSU, i.e. the defense a couple of years ago, because of what I saw in the offseason. So I am now, as a fan, almost like recruiting. I'm so jaded where I'm just like, if I hear our offense is doing awesome in practice, I'm going to think the defense is bad, so you just never know. So me as a fan, I don't really want to see that. I do want to see the guys in purple and gold. I do want to see some highlights, but I'm not going to be like, oh, wow, this guy had 150 yards and 2 tutties in the spring game. That's Nussmeier's favorite target now, because that's the Chris Hilton ruse we keep falling for, is that he'll be the best receiver for a game and then it won't show up during the season.
It's complicated from a lot of different perspectives. Now, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you said basically if you were doing social for something like this and you're shooting video of LSU spring game, you would use a lot of effects and we would not be able to tell if this guy was making a catch 10 yards out of bounds.
Basically. That's the thing, because you don't want to have one giant highlight that sets the internet on fire and sets the guy up for expectation. I think I could use that one to kind of buoy the rest of them, and make it equal to where the one guy's not blowing up and everybody's loving him, and it's the credit's not being shared.
That's true. But ultimately, coaches have the power, and that's what it comes down to, and that's why we're seeing this shift, and it's very much evident. And I think, I guess if they had all of the power, maybe they wouldn't have this at all. But there is still some financial benefits to it, I think. But I just think we're living in a different world now. It's a weird world, very much. It's a world that's very likely going to change with this House settlement, which coaches are begging for it to be finalized before this spring portal window opens up on April 16th. That is also impacting this. Moving parts are the enemy of a college coach. It's why you've heard so much angst the last 4 years, and why, hey, we all support the motives for player empowerment, whatever, and we want kids to be able to get their money, but we just want rules. If you had a nickel for every time you heard that,
so we could break them.
Yeah, we want rules.
We want rules so we can skirt them, but we need to know what they are.
Exactly. Keeping these games off of TV, these spring games, it takes care of some of that. While still getting some of your biggest benefits, which is seeing guys compete. You get to see that with your own eyes. If you're trying to figure out what your two deep is going to look like at defensive tackle, you like being able to see how they're going to be able to prep in this situation. You want to see, is that edge rusher that we think has a lot of potential, is he beating our stud offensive tackle and getting to one-hand touch on the quarterback? You can see these things in a spring game, and there are real takeaways that coaches can have. And you also get to have, the probably overlooked thing is fans getting an experience during an 8-month offseason and appealing to a lot of fans that maybe are priced out of the regular season. There's a lot of that goes on, man, that I probably don't do a good enough job of talking about, of how expensive it's become to be a college sports fan. We've got schools now that are taxing, the player tax. That was a big deal when Tennessee came out with the 10% player tax to be able to cover this new era wherein you're trying to just make as much money on the back end as possible for that $20.5 million that you're distributing to your athletes. And you're trying to, in a way, do right by them so that you're not abandoning them. So that's an important part of this.
And that's a really good point, because if we lived in college towns, it would be really cool to go to this. I think that's the other part of it, is it feels exclusive. And I guess, and that's the other thing. What do? Do you tell fans to check your phone at the door? Because who's to stop somebody from just sitting up there and recording the whole game?
Yeah, you can still do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, you can go full Connor Stallions if you want. Without the iPad and just he's sitting there with sunglasses. You're like, hey, I'm getting my own all 22. This is how we're gonna do it today. Look, I think that there is still a fun experience to be had. And if you live within close enough proximity to these games, go and enjoy it and have your own personal takeaways. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to say that whole excitement is dead. There will be a lot of people that go to these games and to be able to go, hey, A-Day is great. A-Day is one of my favorite days of the year. And I love just how, low key it is and, stress-free compared to, if you're an Alabama fan that's experienced the stress and the pressure of winning throughout the last 17 years, and you get a different sort of experience that goes with it. So, I'm all for that.
You grew up in suburban Birmingham. I went to high school in Hoover. A-Day, every year on my social media, everybody's an A-Day, even if they're not Bama fans. It's so funny. So those guys will still have that same experience, funny enough, actually.
Yeah, and maybe different, things that are connected to it with the NIL stuff. And I don't know how they will do all the autograph stuff before NIL, but they just kind of made it work. That's always been a thing. I don't know. Autographs are, I guess, different set of circumstances, but I guess that's another subject for another time. What's the only thing that can revive spring games? Might be the question, or at least televised spring games. Calendar changes. That's the biggest thing. OTA style workouts that mirror the NFL. That's the hot topic of discussion, which would be now getting guys into the facility. NFL teams are just starting to have guys show up right now. So essentially you would get to finish your spring semester of school and then be able to get guys on back on campus for the startup workouts and then kind of take off from there. I realize school's not finishing up just yet, but you get what I'm saying. One portal window at the end of the school year would be how it would work. And you'd have the portal window, I guess, and then OTAs starting, because that is part of this, the college students calendar. from an academic standpoint, even though it's not a part of it anymore when it comes to bowl game structure, even though they once pretended like they care about that and they don't. It does matter when it comes to changing schools and all of that. But you would have these OTA style workouts, and look, maybe it's not even a spring game, and maybe it's a summer scrimmage with another school. Maybe they would be willing to do that because I think there would be appeal. It seems like there is definitely appeal with the Colorado-Syracuse conversations that are certainly being had, and other schools have come out and said, yeah, it'd be fun to be able to do this. Oklahoma State, like, on board with that. Pack your portable fans. If that's the case, get the ones they used to have in Little League that got the water that squeeze out of it with the little like styrofoam things on the edge. Those fans those are great. They still make those, right? Okay. Just haven't seen them at Target in a while. Haven't had a reason necessarily.
Buddy, you're gearing up. Watch out. Couple years.
I know. Once we hit the even like soccer season in Florida, not warm or not cold whatsoever. But yeah, look. Maybe we would see some of this in the way that, or maybe I guess it would still be non-televised as well, and it would be similar to what happens with college basketball with these exhibition games. You know, there are a lot of those that get reported on, get talked about. You could even see it on their Wikipedia page too, and see the result. You can still hear about it, but what actually happened? Was everybody running, you know, their true sets that we're going to see in the regular season? You don't necessarily have to worry about answering those questions because the season's right after it. But I think all of this could be regulated in the form of a players union or some semblance of that. That could be what's happening. I don't know, but I do know that things are certainly different than they were a few years ago with spring football, and I think they're going to keep changing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer to any of this stuff, right? But I think the easiest answer would be those kind of like, you know, 2-team scrimmages we talked about. I selfishly think the best piece of sports, like behind the scenes content is I Fear God, Homie. And that was from one of those, if you remember, the matchup between Andre Johnson and D'Angelo Hall, where Hall was just like, you know, they went back and forth, and there's the whole like I Fear God, Homie. That was just from like a closed, you know, scrimmage between two teams. I think, you know, once you get athletes that are competitors on the same field, it is kind of hard to go, you know, 60, 70% the way you would against your teammates. So I think that's the risk there. You know, that's the risk there. As a guy who, my MMA career got ended sparring because the guy couldn't go down to below, you know, 80%, and I wasn't expecting it. And so point being, I get it. When guys are competitive, sometimes you lose yourself in that. But at the same time, I think it makes your team better. I think, and the cool thing about maybe not intended positive here is with the portal, there are so many guys who are ex-teammates who can now be competitors. So you see those guys for the first time as being, you know, their teammate, and you're on a competitive scrimmage, you're going to go a little bit harder against that guy because, you know, maybe, you know, he was matched up with you in practice or said something about you on social. So I think that definitely lends itself to the modern situation. But to your point, I think that the old way of just like, I guess, like in coach's mind, giving up free game film or free tape isn't the way to do it in light of Conor Stallions and other things.
The NFL has figured this out.
Yeah.
You can do this, and your entire team will not tear its ACL collectively. I promise. They won't. But, of course, there's always going to be resistance to change with college football. That's just the way that it works. So I thought, let's put together my top 5 favorite random SEC spring game moments of recent memory. Very specific. Very specific. You're going to have ones probably to add to this, or something comes up, just blurt it out, because I tried to put this list together, and then I realized there's not a ton of these. There's not a ton. There are some. There are definitely some. I think Spurrier sneaking into the end zone at the end of the 2018 South Carolina spring game, and then with gloves on, dropping this wide open pass was incredible Spurrier content. That I think it's so much better that he dropped this pass than if he caught it. If he caught it, you're like, all right, it's fun. That was cute. Way funnier that he dropped it, and he just sat there. He basically collapsed to the ground in the end zone. It's just sitting there sprawled out. Head ball coach was past his prime for this one.
We've talked about that. That's one of those moments you guys just grab your leg. You gotta just fake an injury, fake a cramp, start stretching afterward. That's what you got to do.
You can't come out there in gloves and miss that.
Yeah.
You can't, man. You absolutely can't. A tough moment. Very, very tough moment. I've brought this one up before, so I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but Joe Test losing his mind on every one of those Agiye Hall catches in the 2021 Bama spring game was great. Man, oh man. Sorry, I'm not going to do a Joe Test. Man, oh man, I don't want to make too much of an early enrollee freshman. And then Herb Street jumps in as he's saying this, and he's like, why
But
not?
I will.
Why not?
You won't do it, but trust me, I'm Kirk Herbstreit. I will.
Joe Tess says, but are you kidding me with the ball skills and body control of a Jai Hall? Those days are gone. It's sad. Pour one out for those moments. I hope it works out best for Ajay Hall. I hope he has a good life. I really do. It's usually not the best time when a guy's trying to sneak 40 pounds of weed through an airport. I don't know the track record of guys after the fact.
Is that what you know what? I hope he is okay. I'm just going to put that there. That is a lot of weed. Anyway.
Google that one, Will. Orlando Airport, actually.
Oh, no. The mouse is going to never let him go, brother. He's going to be under that airport.
It's a large amount that this happened with. Yeah. Guess his career catch total and guess his current school, not stool.
Oh man, I'm gonna say let's say like 20 catches and current school. I got no guesses.
5 catches.
Oh no,
I think he had 3 in the spring game. Those doesn't count towards his total catches, but I think he had 4 at Bama. I think he had 1 at Texas. If I'm not mistaken. I don't think he had 1 at UCF. He is currently at his 4th school, Sacramento State. That's right. Just made the jump to FBS. So, just saying. Jai Hall. 2018 Bama spring game. Saban on a hot mic, being mad that Jalen Hurts has been in the system for 2 years, but he can't move the offense downfield with his arm, while third stringer Mac Jones can.
Cold take.
Very. We should have declared the QB battle right there, because that was the very famous offseason battle with Tua. It was done right there. It really was. Jalen figured it out. He did. He figured out the throwing thing. But again, that's part of this, where we're going to look back on this era and go, wait a minute. Saban was allowed to be caught on a hot mic on TV of a spring game? What? That's crazy. I don't think that would happen now.
Yeah. I think, to reinforce that point, maybe you need to change the offense a little bit if it don't work for Jalen Hurts. But anyway, so yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing, like all that stuff is totally gone now. And when guys, it's almost like a Phil Jackson thing where guys will do it now for a reason. You know what I'm saying? Guys will do it now to get a message across, but it's very rare to get like actual player evaluations during a TV game like that, We
didn't talk about this when we did the Saban emergency pod after he retired, but I've realized that one of the things I miss most about Saban on the sidelines is actually Saban trailing the play in the spring game while wearing a salmon blazer and just losing his mind over very specific things. That was one of them. That's the most famous example. And the fact that it was on a hot mic too at that moment made it that much better.
It's so with Saban, we got so many different styles, right? We have the light blue blazer when it's time to get into the college football playoff. We have the straw hat when it's the non-televised practices. We have that blazer for the spring game / like A-Day. And then, we have his Joe. So that guy, say what you will, but he was getting some fits off during his years in Alabama.
Nobody in the history of life has had a better spring wardrobe than Nick Saban. Nobody. That guy was ready to go to Easter service at any moment with the outfits he would show up into the spring game. We miss it. 2021 A&M spring game. Mic'd up Jimbo Fisher was a trip, an absolute trip. How anyone on the field could understand him is beyond me. No idea. And I must have actually watched this in real time. I know I said earlier that I think I watched that on replay on YouTube. I remember watching this in real time.
You had to see the start of the dynasty, bro. I get it.
Look, 2020, best AP top 25 finish since 1939.
Yep.
A&M was feeling it. And Jimbo was feeling it a little bit too. They had a quarterback battle. Haynes King, Zach Calzada, 2 guys starting in other places. How about that?
Is Haynes King done yet, man?
Is he back too? No. Haynes King is never done. Haynes King is back.
So they're both going to start this year. That's really cool. How about that? That was an entire presidential administration ago, this gentleman were competing in spring in the SEC.
They were not good that day. They were bad, and it was easy to kind of blame it on the wind, I remember. But Jimbo would just defend them at every single turn and blast everyone else. Like, you would watch Zach Calzada sail a throw 10 yards over the receiver's head, and Jimbo is just like in his version, MFing the receiver and being like, why'd you stop your route there?
Dadgummit.
So many dadgummits. Oh, my gosh. Well, infinity dadgummits that day. That was a great showing. Not really so much a moment, but more so just 2 hours into the very specific lens of Jimbo Fisher. Oh, it's great stuff. And then this one is for you, Will. The highlight of Miles Brennan's career, probably a fake spike, long touchdown pass, and a gritty. The best 12 seconds that Miles Brennan has had on a football field. Even though I think I sold my Miles Brennan stock officially 3 years ago, but there's definitely a part of me that I want to short the stock. I'm not entirely sure I know what that means, but if I could, I would short the Miles Brennan stock. 2021, just I guess maybe the peak of spring games it was. I think that's probably a result of the COVID canceled 2020 spring games and everybody in 2021 being like, let's have fun again. Remember how much this sucked last year? Let's do all these fun, crazy things, and let's let coaches be mic'd up and everybody's going to be themselves. NIL and portal have probably since killed that. But Miles Brennan, fake spike, touchdown pass, gritty, deadly combination.
Yeah, I mean, Miles Brennan, that's the thing. Miles Brennan is exactly the example. And I would almost say more than Jai Hall, because it's like Miles Brennan felt like a folk character coming out. He was related to the famous Brennan family. He lived on a boat for a couple of years. I remember that, before he came to LSU, everything about him was like, who is this character?
He was Hurricane Katrina, where his house got taken in hurricane.
Yeah,
because he was living in Mississippi, right? I remember that.
Yeah, he was in Port St. Lucie, I think. He had this crazy backstory, and we saw it. But it was whoa, here's the next guy. And honestly, kind of similar to how Nuss was, where it's oh, you got this family, we're waiting and waiting and waiting to see you. One of those guys obviously worked out pretty well. The other one, not as much. He obviously got injured and had all the stuff. But that's a great example, especially for a quarterback, where it's man, I'm building a mythology in my mind of what this guy can be, and it just never comes to fruition.
Any spring game moments that I forgot here? I mean, there's plenty that I forgot. Just I try to stick to the SEC because if we were getting outside the SEC, I mean, Nebraska's got two of the best. Jack Hoffman, the late Jack Hoffman, that moment, and then the faux Pelini raising the cat. I think I was there for that.
How could you forget that?
Well, Pelini era was a blur. Let me tell you, because I'm trying to remember if that was 13 or 14. I was there for that because that would have been 14, right? I think I was there for 14 and 15 spring games because I wasn't there for the 13 spring game.
That's the most interesting thing they've done is that, like I said, I've never been a huge spring game guy. I think that, the one that you mentioned, I remember being excited about Racey McMath. But I think outside of that, it's maybe the two, Daniels quarterbacks, JT and Jaden. Now there was one went to this spring game, one went to this spring game. What are we doing? It was the light transfer thing. It was kind of used as recruiting. We talked about it with Dion had some guys that used their film to go get recruited other places. So I think those are some of the recent ones that come to mind. But I try to counter message myself to buy into that stuff. That's what I'm saying. You gotta I try to flush it as soon as it gets done.
This is gonna be a negative one. I feel like I've been dumping on Auburn a lot lately, so I apologize. I don't mean to do that, but the Joey Gatewood buzz going into that first spring game that he was gonna play. Now he didn't have Jeremy Johnson buzz, but there was so much Joey Gatewood, Cam Newton buzz. This might be when my initial evergreen take about don't compare anyone to Cameron Newton began with Joey Gatewood. I think he's the poster child for it. Jeremy Johnson's also a poster child for it. But and then seeing Joey Gatewood throw a football in that spring game, I said, guys, never, ever. Don't forget same sentence as Cam Newton. I don't want same paragraph. I don't want same day. Just don't do it. And that was one of those spring game performances where I went into it very skeptical. And then I felt like my skepticism was not only confirmed, but I went even further in the other direction. And I was like, this is a long way off. And Joey Gatewood ended up playing tight end and switching positions later when he transferred, ironically enough, initially to Kentucky and then to UCF. I think there was another school added in there too. Probably.
Do you have this written down? I just looked this up because I had to. Yeah, because I had to look it up because I remembered that the final school. So that spring game was 2018. What year do you think he took his last? I'm not gonna count a bowl game. What was this?
Quarterback reps?
No. His last reps in college football. That was 2018.
22.
Close. It looks like he took a sabbatical or got injured here. 23.
Wow.
Yeah, Joey Gatewood. He popped up a year later, different position. Date Mike, new year, new me. Still wasn't very good. Had 3 tutties as a receiver tight end at Louisville. So that was the last school. Louisville, Auburn, Kentucky, UCF, Louisville.
Hope Joey Gatewood's doing well.
Yeah.
Hope Joey Gatewood's doing well. But yeah, the spring game moments where sometimes there's like the confirmation bias of a big time recruit, and then there's the other way wherein you kind of realize, oh, this might be pretty ugly, and it's very difficult for me to not overreact to all this stuff. But yeah, feels like we're in a very different time with spring games, and I don't know that we're going to have a whole lot of moments that will come anywhere close to that. And if we do, and if they somehow squeeze out and we get them, that would be great, and I would absolutely love it. And I'm sure it may, I mean, hopefully have at least some takeaways from these spring games.
Joey Gatewood, by the way, currently on the Calgary Stampeders. Wait for those cuts to come around Florida State, because that will be an analyst for you soon.
Probably. Yeah, pair up with Gus.
It's already followed him. So there you go.
Makes a lot of sense. Joey Gatewood's going to have a good life. Joey Gatewood's going to have a good life. I definitely hope and believe that'll be the case. All right, let's kick it to Sam Pittman. Pittman never misses. We talked about working with Petrino that first year and what it's going to be like in year two, kind of how their dynamic has developed. Taylor Green, of course, the four local quarterback, the ebbs and flows that he's endured during his now, this is going to be year 6 for Sam Pittman at Arkansas. It's crazy why that Tennessee win meant so much to him and a whole lot more. So here is Sam Pittman. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is the Boss Hog, Sam Pittman. Sam, let's start with the question that I know I'm always curious about when we chat. I know there's been some pretty extreme weather just kind of across the United States lately, it feels like. How is the slobbering hog statue holding up?
Well, I had a pump go out down there, and I wanted to slobber a little bit more than what we did in the past. So I had a pump going out, and as of I think on Monday they put a new pump in it, and I haven't seen, but I think it's slobbering pretty good right now and ready to roll for the good weather. And boats are going out. You know, we just were on spring break last week, and heck, I got on my boat about 4 times. Forced 2 of the days. It was a little windy and cold, but um, yeah, it's doing good, and people started coming by it again already. So I think it'll be ready for summer and ready for the folks.
Are people being respectful of the statue? Because I know you've had that issue in the past where people want to come up to it and it's like, hey, like don't touch the statue. It's a slobbering hog. It's a piece of art that you have on your property. Have you had to deal with that?
Oh, I've dealt with it in the past, and most of the time when they're on jet skis, and they'll come jump up in there and flip me off whenever they leave, But other than that, it's been pretty good. There's plenty of signs that say, "Hey, man, this is a valuable hog to me. It means more than just a statue. So please, kind of respect it as you would the hogs." And so, but no. It's been fine. It's a lot of fun. People come over and call the hogs, and just a lot of fun. And I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing the smiles on the guys' faces.
You have proven that hogs are more powerful than marlins because the marlin was what was there initially. The insurance claim was what wiped it out. Yeah, I bet this time of year is pretty unique in the college football calendar. But not to go too big picture, this is probably a little bit of an anxious time with the way that the portal window now sets up. And I know it's embracing every day, but what about this window, this post spring window, kind of makes April just a challenging month for college football coaches?
Yeah, I think you're always very concerned about it. And we thought we were told, and we thought that there would be one portal, and the April portal would go away, which obviously, you'd have to make it make sense to me in that you go through spring ball, you probably should know what your team's going to look like. Now, we haven't had a lot of movement in April. We have had a lot of movement, as well documented, in December. You see a lot of movement right now in basketball, but that's because their season's just over, just like football, where it affects the bowl games, it affects your team, whatever. Um, but I do think that, we cannot recruit another SEC. We couldn't if a guy went in the portal from another SEC team. We can't take him, nor can they take us. So that does help. Um, but of course, you're always concerned about it because you don't know, who's calling who, and it's But in the past, this hasn't been a big deal now because we have to get our roster to 105. I think for the public, for us, and for everybody, it's going to look like, man, there is a lot of movement in the portal. The bottom line is we have 119 on our team. We've got to get to 105. So at that point, you're going to have some conversations with the guys and say, hey, look, after the spring game, and then you're going to go, hey, look, now there's going to be a possibility that you'll be able to make the 105. There'll be a possibility you won't. I think we owe that to the guys because, you can get your roster to 105 the day before the first game. At that point, if they're not on the 105, they're also not on the team. So I think for us, I want to be honest with the guys where they sit, where they stand, and go from there and really put the decision more in, tell them the truth, and then put the decision in their hands and not necessarily in mine.
How hard is that? Because that gets easily spun into this guy got cut or this guy didn't make the 105 and they're stripping his scholarship away. And you could see a headline that all of a sudden looks really bad. How difficult is that to be in that spot as a head coach, knowing that in this day and age, it just has to spread and it has to be that one guy where all of a sudden, maybe things didn't go well in that meeting room and all of a sudden you're looking up going, man, I thought we had a pretty clear conversation of what was expected of each other.
Well, that's the thing about a coach is that you don't have a rebuttal. In other words, you're not going to get in a conversation about, well, this is really what happened. This is not, I mean, it's part of coaching. I'm not saying that that's right, but I am saying that it's part of coaching. So the narrative can get screwed any skewed in any way you want it to. But probably more important than that is you have guys that put blood, sweat, and tears into your program that you're talking to going, man, I just don't know if you'll ever have an opportunity to play here, but you're so valuable to the team. But we got to get to 105. It's more a personal deal in that I really, really appreciate you. I love you. But the rules now say we can't be at 120 anymore. We have to be at 105. So that's probably the most difficult part of it. The backlash from the media and all that. Hell, if I was worried about that, I'd quit a long time ago.
How aggressive do you feel like you have to be in the post spring window? Do you feel like you have a good idea of what that's going to look like for you?
I
Because
do.
it depends a lot on your own roster, obviously.
I do. And it comes down to numbers, to be honest with you. We're light in the secondary number wise. We're a little light on the D line. So we could be light at linebacker. So now I'm assuming that nobody comes in here, scholarship player comes in here and says, I'm going in the portal. If that happens, then, we're probably anywhere from 4 to 6 scholarship guys that we probably need to bring in. And most of that is defensive related simply because of numbers.
For those of us that maybe didn't necessarily get to see the dynamic that you guys have on a daily basis, how would you describe your first year getting to work with Bobby Petrino?
Oh, it was great. I've always been a believer in hiring, if I could, hiring somebody that's had experience either at the SEC level or major college level as a coach, as a coordinator, where I can run things off and visit with them about that. And of course, Bobby's had the experience at a lot of places, including the NFL, but also Arkansas. And so uh, gone very, very, very well. He's obviously a outstanding person and football coach, and I've enjoyed every bit of it.
You said last year that you were going to be the one that was going to go into his office and just kind of bother him and just always be asking questions. Did you kind of stick to that?
I think I bother him, but not as much as I did before. I think I've understood that any time that I'm taking away from him, developing our offense and meeting with his guys is So I do it either. If I do it, I do it a little bit later in the day or over lunch or something like that. But him, and I'll be honest with you, I've talked to Travis Williams more, because he's been here, he understands, and I've run things by him a little bit more this year as well.
Tell me what that rapport is like with assistants, because you've had it before where you've had to kind of manage, oh, this guy's getting a head coaching job, and for a while that was the conversation with Barry Odom. We've seen what happened since then,
It's been great.
and he's been, he's getting this new opportunity, and obviously he has you to thank for that. But what is that dynamic like with Travis Williams? Because he's a guy that I always put in these conversations of guys like he's getting a head coaching job really, really soon, and you're the one that's got to kind of manage that and know that if he does his job as he should, which I think so far for the most part that's been the case, that opportunity is going to come for him.
Yeah, I want him to. I don't want to lose him, but I want him to. I want him to have that opportunity to go out and run his own team, and I think he's ready to do that. And he'll, he had some conversations this year with, with some Division 1A possibilities of being head coach, but at the same time, I want it to be right for him. And, anytime you take your first one, you don't want to run into a place that can't win or a place that administrative wise doesn't give you a chance. So I think he does have an opportunity to do that. I just want him to be picky and want him to take the right one that feels good to him and his family. And that will happen at some point because he's deserving of that.
What sort of dynamic do Talon and Bobby have? Because they had that rapport as, Bobby being the guy who offered him his first scholarship during the recruiting process. And that was something that he talked about when he came to Arkansas from Boise State. But what's that relationship been like after now seeing a year of it where you have to deal with the ups and downs? And it was not all ups. There was plenty of ups, but there was plenty of those moments, I'm sure, where those two guys had to figure each other out to be able to make things work.
Well, I think we forget at times that Taylor Green played about half the season injured, so there are some things that Bobby had to adjust, some things that Taylor had to adjust. I think there's high respect between the two guys. And I think that Taylor believes that Bobby's the best thing for him to help him win games for the Hogs and get drafted higher in the draft. They have a wonderful relationship. It's not always, it's coaching and it's understanding. And I think Taylor has grown in that. Hey, he's trying to get me to be the best player I can be and the best team leader I can be. But he always has had great leadership qualities about him, and he's got that positive outlook, and he's got a great belief in himself. So as long as he keeps that, I think he's just going to continue to get better and better, which we've seen throughout spring ball. He's also healthy now, and that makes a ton of difference.
Does your heart stop when Talon hurdles?
Not if he clears the guy. If he gets
Six
caught
six.
midair, yes.
6'6" dudes hurtling is just not something that the human eye is used to seeing. And when that happening at Auburn, even I'm like, oh my God, like what in the world is that? Do you have a talk with him when he comes to the sideline, or is like, all right, Bobby's going to take care of that?
No, my talks to him are more trying to keep his confidence up and all those things. But you can't like the athleticism of a guy and then allow him not to use it. So no, heck no. I probably said, man, that's a hell of a play, Be careful.
What's Talon capable of being within the SEC, that SEC hierarchy? Let's say he puts together that full season. It's year two in this scheme, obviously multiple seasons as a starter at this level. What is he capable of being? Is it one of the SEC's best quarterbacks? Is that the type of ceiling you believe he has?
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. I think, let me say this, there's a lot of good quarterbacks out there. I wouldn't trade him for any of them. So I think that he's unlimited in what he can do. and I think he's got a great coach and a great schematics and guys who are getting better up front on the O line around him. So I think you'll see a better Taylor Green because we've gotten better around him and he's gotten better personally.
You talked last year about wanting to be more hands-on with the offensive line again. How was that experience? What did you kind of learn about yourself now that you've had the head coaching experience in between kind of that and getting back to that sort of role, getting back to your roots as an offensive line coach? How did that go of year one, kind of trying that mentality out again?
I think twofold. Number one, I really believe in our offensive line coach, Coach Mateus, that we have, and me working with him here at Arkansas before, I think helps both of our relationship. Uh, when we go into individual, when we go into team, when I meet with the offense, which is after every practice and before every meeting, um, there's probably 90% of that meeting goes about offensive line play, to be perfectly honest with you. And Eric's good at taking, but I've found that I can do a little bit more after off the video in helping technique things and why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And if the answer is good, then we'll just keep doing it. If the answer is something, well, what about trying this, trying that? But you have to have a special guy like Eric is to be able to do that because a guy who you haven't worked with or whatever, he may think it's nitpicky and he may think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And he may think that I'm picking on him. And that's not the case. I just want the offensive line to be as good as anybody has in the country. And if I have something that I think can help it, then shame on me if I don't say it.
What was the cold beer of choice after the Tennessee win?
Oh, Miller Lite. That was easy. I mean, you've asked some great questions. That's easy. That was like lob it up there.
What was the last time you had anything but Miller Lite to celebrate a nice victory? That's the better question.
I like some old Coors Light every now and then, uh, I think that's I think that's about it, Back in the day, you'd have a little Bush Light and stuff when you was on a budget, and little natty light when your budget was running a little low. They're obviously good beers, but um, got a little bit more money and decided to go with those old pint Miller Lights.
Which UT win meant more for you? And Tennessee fans are going to get upset that it's called Texas UT, but the Texas win in 21 felt so significant with, the situation you inherited and obviously that moment. It really was kind of like, wow, Arkansas is back at the forefront of the national conversation. How did that compare to last year in being able to beat that Tennessee team and to give the home fans something that obviously they didn't experience the previous season?
Well, I think, Texas is Texas, and I think it meant a ton to the universe, to the state. I think anytime it means something to the state, then it becomes more meaningful to me, which both the games did, But Texas was pretty special. Texas at the time was maybe 15th. Tennessee was fourth. And then there was a lot of games in between that Texas game and the Tennessee game, and a little bit of our football team, our state being able to win the Tennessee game at number 4, a really good football team. Because of all the things that had gone between, we'd went to, the Outback Bowl, we'd went to Liberty Bowl, we'd had a losing season, and then coming back, when everybody had the coach gone and all that, which isn't good for recruiting, but and then coming out and beating undefeated number 4 team in the country with a lot of help from the stadium, a lot of help from the people in the stands. Uh, Probably that one, to be honest with you, just simply. Now, if my hip wasn't crushing me and it was awful, I probably would have celebrated a little bit more than what I did. But to answer your question, I think the Tennessee game last year.
You shoot it straight. I mean, you're just talking about enduring what that was like, those conversations of coaches gone, it hurts in recruiting. But I mean, reality is, unless you're Nick Saban or Kirby Smart, getting to year 6 in the SEC, you're going to hear that at some point. Like it's just,
I mean, you getting to year 6 and having 4 out of 5 bowls, winning every one you played. The only coach that went to Florida and won. There's some, we beat a top 5 team this year. There's a lot more positives going on than but negative sales. I get all that. I don't think it's fair for anybody, but I think if you're in the public eye, you're gonna get crushed. I don't care who you are. When Coach Saban was coaching, if he lost a game, my Lord, uh, for years we used, in recruiting, when's he going to retire, all those things. Um, but it's part of it. I'm a lot better than I've ever been. I'm certainly off of social media. So that helps, and I've asked my wife to be up. It really doesn't have a lot to do with me. It has more to do with your family, and the effect that it has. I listened to Cal talk about it, after one of his games, and it made a lot of sense. But the bottom line is, I want to be the head coach at Arkansas. So all that comes with it is not going to be rosy. That's just how it is. And so I'm dealing with it, I think, as good as I've ever done with it. And would I rather be at the lake or be the head coach at Arkansas? I'd rather be here calling them hogs.
plenty of time to be at the lake. Plenty of
That's
time for that.
right. Amen.
By the way, I like how you say we used to say that, oh, when's Saban gonna retire? And you probably didn't get to play that card as effectively as you would have liked to, like all those years at Georgia, where it's like, all right, it's gonna happen at some point. But you threw that in there, and it's reality. Like anything that could be used as negative recruiting can be used. And for you,
Well,
I'm sure people would
will
say
be
that.
will be used, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it is. The only guy that knows what I'm going to do is me, and so obviously there's a lot of speculation about a lot of different things. Last year I was the hottest coach in America, and all those things. But I knew we had a good team. Now obviously we got to cut the turnovers down. We'd had a better team. Uh, but I'm the only one, and I'm very, very confident. And I want to be the head coach here, and very, very confident in this year's team. Should be. We've done a lot of good things this spring, and I've got a good group of players and a good coaching staff. So you just have to deal with it. And I would say of the 120, let's say, D1 schools, there are probably 60 to 70 guys dealing with something like that. And, you never know when a guy's going to leave. At least, I'm not leaving here. I'm not going to go take another job. So I always use that as well in recruiting.
In honor of the late Bob Holtz, I gotta ask you a two-parter
Love
about
him.
Landon Jackson. Yeah, the very famous two-parter, three-parter SEC Media Days. It won't be the same without Bob there being able to fire those off. One, how scary was it watching that guy, lay on the field, regular season finale, where you're like, man, Landon Jackson's been huge for our program, and we know what he sacrificed to come back for that extra year when he could have gone to the NFL. And then two, how rewarding has it been to see that guy continue to kind of climb up these draft boards during the pre-draft process and have everybody kind of going, man, we need to take a closer look at that guy because he's doing things that, I mean, simply put, like that will play at the next level.
I'm so proud of him. He never one time came in here ever about I'm going in the portal. Never. He was so easy to deal with. Uh, he's a grown man, is what he is. Has been that way ever since he walked in the door. Jamie and I got invited to his draft party, so we'll get to go down there. That's priceless. That's when a guy gets drafted, and he gets drafted at any point, but when he gets drafted where he believes that he's going to get drafted, like when I went to Frank's party, uh, very, very, you can't buy it. It's just priceless. And so I'm really happy with him. I think he's upped his stock. I think his stock was really high when he was here. But I think he's really upped his stock now where they're legitimately talking about him in the first round. And I pray and hope that's where he goes. And we're going to be down there, and hopefully we'll be a part of that.
This has been great. Want to get you out of here with some rapid fire, just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Well, I'll tell you first or second, sometimes my mind works a little different.
All right. What's your go-to in-flight entertainment?
Forrest Gump,
Every time?
if I can. I love that movie. Comedy, slap comedy. Love it.
That's a really good plane movie too, because the variety in
Great
it and the
planes.
length of it.
It's a long movie. It's the first, well, I'm gonna tell you why. It's the first movie I ever watched on a plane.
Really? How young were
Recruiting,
you?
I was recruiting Matt O'Neill, and I was flying out there, and I go, God, dogs, they got a thing here, and you can buy whatever. Back, I think when you could pay for cash, and I watched that, and that old boy taught Elvis how to dance. And I mean, he did everything. And I thought it was a great movie. Won the Heisman. I thought it was great.
Did it all. Okay, I asked this question a little bit nervously, but how is Lucy the Bulldog doing?
Now you're nervous because Lucy was old, 14. Lucy passed. Now we got Caramel Latte.
Okay.
So Latte is another fat square with a head called a bulldog. And she's now about a little over a year. And so I think she's number 5 for us. But Lucy lived 14 years. That's a long, long time for a bulldog. And so she had a great life. But now we got Latte.
Latte. I like that. That's a good name. Can you name
That's my wife, by the way, not mine. Jamie likes coffee. She's kind of brown or whatever. So she looked kind of like a latte.
nothing wrong with a latte? Get everything going, start the day. Nothing wrong with that.
No,
Can you name the list of SEC coaches who have been at their jobs longer than you have?
I think so. Stoops, Kirby. There was a bunch of us got hired in the same time.
That's it.
I don't
Yeah,
think there's anybody else.
that's it. It's you. Those two. You named it. Yeah,
Year 6 now. I mean, that's a long time in this league.
very
What's
long
that?
time.
About 3.5, I think.
Yeah,
So in that aspect, I'm kicking butt.
I would agree with that. What's the best meal that you've had in recent memory?
I'm so simple. If something happened and I was getting ready to get rid of me, I'd order 2 cheeseburgers, some Ruffles, plain chips, and ranch to dip the Ruffles in. That's why I'm so sleek, my build. But the best meal that I've had is probably that, in my mind. Now, I love to go to steak places and eat steak and all that as well. But uh, if I had a choice, it'd be a couple of cheeseburgers with some big old tomatoes and mayonnaise on it.
Love how you just answered that as your electric chair meal. It's something. If something were to happen, yeah,
Well, you got to be prepared on everything, don't you?
that's very true. You never know. Last one for you. What does embracing the hog look like in 2025?
It starts with leadership, and I'm not the only leader in the building. So it starts with accountability from everybody in this building, and it works down to the kids. I love this group of kids. I think they're fighters. They're physical. Not We don't have a lot of complaining going on and all that. Uh, so I think this team is embracing the hog. I think this team is tough and physical and accountable and loyal. And you really find out about guys. You can't find out how tough somebody is unless you do tough situations. Our guys have been through that. We believe in a physical spring. A lot of guys now don't. We believe in the spring game. A lot of guys don't. But you've got to do what you believe in. I'm the head coach, and that's what I believe in. And I think our kids are getting better from that. And I think we're finding out more about them, about embracing the hog. But I feel like we've got a really good staff and really good players that believe in the University of Arkansas and the state of Arkansas.
Sam, Always appreciate the time. Wish you guys the best of luck this year.
Good to see you, man. Have a good one.
Well, lad of the week, we're going to give Florida some more flowers, aren't we?
Yes. Yes, we are. You want to start? You want me to start? You tell me.
You start. Fire away.
Okay, cool. So mine's going to be, they're the obvious ones, that come with the Florida title. And we've heard a ton about those guys. But a guy that I feel like might low key be having a moment here is Florida AD Scott Strickland. Now, this is a guy that I would say as recently as a year ago, people were fed up with. I saw a lot of fire. Yeah, less than that. I saw, a lot of fire Scott Strickland, like not even hashtags, like display names on Twitter talking about it. And if you think about the situation this guy walked into, the Jim McElwain situation, he brings over his guy from Mississippi State and Dan Mullen, a guy that was a great hire at the time. I think he did well at Florida. I think we've seen that Florida's a little bit harder to win at than I think people give it credit for. I'll give him credit on the Dan Mullen hire. I think it was a great hire. It just didn't work out. And so you've seen, the baseball team, which has been well established, they, won that title against LSU pretty much as soon as he got there. The basketball team was cooking. The football team was good under Mullen. And then everything just fell apart, like kind of basically post-COVID. Like it all just kind of started to unravel. They had that super team in baseball that had College Ohtani, and he's doing awesome, by the way, in the minors. And that team, I think, fell a little bit short, being upset by LSU. And it felt like, the shine is starting to come off of, the Florida brand. The logo is starting to hold a little bit less weight. And Florida has, like I said, prided themselves as being in everything's cool. And I think that, unlike most of the SEC, I do think that's true about Florida. I think that they are legitimately in basketball expectations. Obviously, you can't really win a title, especially in basketball, without championship expectations. Baseball, he's presided over a title. Only thing that's missing is football. And this could be the beginning of kind of the real redemption arc here with how we've seen, Lagway, the Florida football team, starting the trend where we could be looking back at this and saying, we've seen this with plenty of famous coaches where it's like, we tried to run this guy out and he had that second wind in him. So, yeah, I'm very fascinated by Florida's athletics department as it seems that, the baseball team is kind of up and down this year, but the baseball team is going to be fine, right? Like Florida's baseball team is going to be fine. The basketball team looks like they're in great hands. The football team need another year. Okay, we still need another year, but I think that they're on the path to the redemption that he was hoping for with Mullen. That again, he got there briefly during the COVID season, and Trask was awesome, and those guys are still, in the NFL. Cal Pitts and them tearing it up. But yeah, I think that if Florida's on the best track that it has been, I think since when?
2008.
Wow. I think about 2014. I think with Patrick Young and those boys, Muschamp, had a good team
was
as
in
well.
his last year, though. Like, you knew it was going to be kind of a lame duck year.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, having everything kind of working together again, like baseball's going to be fine, right? So point being, I think this is the Florida brand right now, video snapshot right now, post-title is on a great trajectory. It all comes down to football. Let's say 40% of the pie, 50% of the pie, which is a small amount in the SEC, but a big amount, obviously, overall, is still up to football. But I think if that's going, now you're in everything school.
There's an interesting sliding doors that's just kind of now occurring to me thinking about this Florida school year. And if you remember when the Todd Golden Title IX investigation came down, and I remember I had lunch with our guy Candler that day. And I remember it was on a Friday when all this came out. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, like this looks really bad. This is probably going to get him fired. If you have an interim boss at the time, or it's not the guy that hired you, probably a decent chance that coach is not getting due process.
Yeah.
Probably a decent chance that he's out of a job, and this Florida team that we knew was going to be good coming into the year on the basketball side is probably in a much different spot. And so I relate that back to Strickland, because if it had gotten even worse in September and all of a sudden the powers that be above him say, Strickland, you're gone, because ultimately Strickland probably wasn't going to be the guy to fire Billy Napier. It was going to have to come from him getting fired, the old Sean Eichhorst into Bo Pelini. I hate to compare everything to Nebraska, but that's the example I always bring up. And it was going to have to work like that. And if Strickland had gotten fired in September, who knows what happens with the Todd Golden situation? Like, really? And even though he's since proven, post-investigation to be innocent in that, you're still potentially dealing with some very odd factors. And Strickland, was willing to kind of let the process play out and willing to understand that this is a very sensitive issue that like we have to get figured out. We have to see if these claims are in fact true. And if they are, then a potential championship run is going to go by the wayside. And instead, we know how this turns out, and Golden ends up winning a title after a year that just couldn't have started weirder, And there are athletic directors in that spot that would have felt the pressure and been like, saw those headlines and immediately said, nope, you're gone.
Yeah.
And Strickland, to his credit, let the process play out, which had to be a difficult thing to do at the time.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And again, like, remember who wants, your coaches fired often. Like, Florida fans would be super happy to have Kirby Smart get fired, right? Because he's the one who brought it over to the edge, right? So sometimes that stuff can be a little bit like, oh, the sky is falling, but it's coming from the outside. And so I think it's good to note that, and again, like taking everything seriously, like I'm not going to say, let's just assume everyone's innocent and pretend like that didn't happen. Like you got to go through due process. I think that's a great word for it. And I'll say this on kind of a related but unrelated note. There's a guy, if you are ever just bored, I would love for you to talk to this guy. I don't know if I told you about this. John's old roommate, my friend, he swam at Florida in the mid 2000s. And I've heard
Caleb Dressel.
No, he's a Hungarian guy. His name is Balázs, and
Ryan Lochte. Oh no,
well, that was his story for like the peak of Florida. He was like, well, man, we'd be in the club, we'd be feeling good. We had Ryan Lochte there. All the girls would come talk to us. He's like, man, then the basketball team would walk in. It would be Corey Brewer, and it would be Joakim Noah, and then some of the girls would go talk to them. He said, then the football team would walk in. They'd have Tebow and Aaron Hernandez or whoever, and he's like, you just be in these bars with these future millionaires, and you're walking around. Ryan Lochte's dapping up Tebow, and he's like, it felt like a comic strip. And imagine in the most like cartoonish Hungarian accent you could ever imagine. And that's my boy. And so it feels like a fantasy land. We talked about Florida in the mid 2000s. So as a fan of a rival school, I hope it doesn't happen. But as a fan of the SEC, I hope it does.
Yeah, I've talked to probably like half a dozen people that went to school at Florida at that time. And it's just, it's so wild to think about. Truly, truly wild. And I'm not saying that this generation is going to ever experience anything quite like that, because that's proven to be one of
before,
one.
and it'll probably never happen again. Yeah.
And not in the revenue of not like the big revenue era where you can actually make significant money off of that. And that's reaping rewards that are really significant for your university, different than winning a title, 1920s or something like that. But it very much is a special time for Florida, and they feel incredible to have experienced a championship after a lot of tough times, really, in the 2020s. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to go with Will Richard. Had to be a Florida player here. Obviously, Walter Clayton Jr. could have been a candidate here. In my opinion, he won-upped Kemba Walker's run in 2011. But Monday night, the first guy that Todd Golden signed at Florida was the best player on the floor in a national championship. I mean, that's...
Now, hold on. I can't have been on nothing but nice to it. They had to win the entire conference tournament to make the dance.
They did not. They did not.
Oh, that was Shabazz. My bad. Because they had the same story.
They were a 3 seed.
But one of those teams was worse. You're so right. Shabazz
2014 was worse. Yes. 2014 was definitely worse. People forget, like, that UConn team, too. Shabazz was on that UConn team as, like, the fourth leading scorer. And Jeremy Lamb was also on that team, too. And then their road to the national championship was much easier. And they watched Butler shoot 3 for 31 from 2-point range in a national championship and score 41 points and set basketball back 50 years. We don't need to get into that. Florida's road was so much more difficult.
They really did have an all-time road. That's a good point. Yeah. I think the Butler stuff has aged pretty well with Brad Stevens, but it's still Butler at the end of the day. Going through all the 1 seeds and all that stuff it's hard to find. This is one of the few that have seen all the 1 seeds advance.
Yeah, and I mean, it was they said, like, for a 1 seed, it's tied with the toughest road ever that a 1 seed has had to win a national championship, because it was facing Texas Tech instead of St. John's, even though Texas Tech was better in Ken Pom than St. John's was. But look, Richard was incredible in that title game. He kept them from getting Tennessee'd by Houston. That first half, where he has half of their points, he had 14 of their 28 points. And at one point, he was 4 for 6 from 3, and everyone else on Florida's roster is 2 for 28. I mean, he kept him in the game in the first half, and defensively, he ends up having the all-important strip on Emmanuel Sharp, second to last possession. Kind of similar to the play that he made against UConn. That's a little bit underrated, that where UConn had the ball up 3. I think it was 3 minutes left, and he gets a strip off the guy's leg to force a turnover in that spot, so they stay within one possession. But he was also the one that was D'ing up Cryer, who made him wait that extra second to get the ball to Sharp, where Clayton was late on the closeout. People don't forget that. Like, Clayton kind of fell asleep as Sharp was being ISO'd on that play, and they were really just trying to set him up for a deep three coming off the screen there. But Clayton kind of fell asleep and was bailed out a bit by Richard on that play by the defense that he had on Cryer. But yeah, I think Will Richard wins them that championship. If he's not playing at that level, I don't think Florida cuts down the nets. Go figure, a guy coming over from Belmont, who was there before Walter Clayton, was there before Condon, was there before Houck. Like, he hosted Walter Clayton on his visit too, which is, I mean, that's incredible to think about as well. Just such a huge part of this championship run. And unlike his doppelganger, Russell Westbrook, yeah. I haven't seen anybody throw that out there yet. I want to be first on that. Very much looks like Russell Westbrook. Unlike him, he actually has positive interactions with fans. Great clip of him signing his shoes to a young fan, giving him those game-worn shoes after a national championship. Can you imagine being that kid going to school the next day and telling all your buddies, yeah, no big deal. I just got Will Richard's shoes from the national championship. Nobody believes that kid. Nobody will believe him. He'd be like, there's zero chance that actually happened. And then all he's got to do is just whip out his phone and show them, yeah, this is the interaction. These are the shoes. I promise I didn't just write, like scribble his name on there. But what an all-time game for a guy that just meant so much to that program. Will Richard was incredible. He got voted to the all-tournament team too, as well, ahead of Janai Broome, which I think upset a lot of Auburn fans.
Yeah. I mean, and to your point, goes without saying, Walter Clayton Jr., all-time run. Paige Beckers, another one after this championship, weekend. Great way to end her career at UConn. That's kind of been up and down with the injuries and everything, setting herself up to still be the number one pick in the WNBA, proving everyone wrong. So, yeah, this is a really, really compelling championship season for basketball.
I thought I was going to have to get on here and talk about Kelvin Sampson for Lad of the Week.
We were so close.
For a while. So close. So close. That's a pod. That'll do it. Like I said earlier, please, if you are at all looking at daily fantasy space, Dabble. Dabble's going to hook you up. Use that promo code SDS2, $25 in bonus cash, no deposit required. That is promo code SDS2 on Dabble. Get yourself involved. Daily fantasy with MLB going on. We got NBA playoffs coming up. Lots and lots of great stuff, even though March Madness is over. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at SatDown South, at CJ O'Gara, at Ghost of Heart. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.